My name is Roland Schuster. I'm the managing principal of the Schuster Group and president and founder of TANGO. Thanks for joining us today. Today's format's a little different. It's kind of a fireside chat or an open dialogue. So I think it's going to be of great interest. We are all in a very unique world these days. The new normal still isn't all that normal. So they're going to be talking about how to survive this nonprofit quarantine and some of the challenges and potential solutions that are out there for nonprofits. Next slide, please. So why TANGO? TANGO was something I thought of, about 14 years ago. We launched it 12 years ago. And it really is a result of me spending most of my insurance career focusing on working with nonprofits. To the point that I thought that there would be a way to actually do business differently. Capitalism should not be at odds with community support, that there is a way that when done right, both parties can benefit. And our tagline really is doing well by doing good. And that philosophy is shared not only by us at TANGO, but all of our partners that are part of TANGO. They all are experts in working in the nonprofit sector. They have a unique value proposition, and they're blending their work life with a way to support the sector. So oftentimes this initiative is referred to as a social enterprise. Next slide, please, Tucker, or Amber, I'm sorry. All of you nonprofits that are part of TANGO, as you well know, there is no charge to be part of TANGO. And that is simply because of our partners. So all of these firms that you see on the slide are our vetted partner group, and they all help support financially the existence of TANGO. So none of what we do to help the sector would be possible without the contributions and support of all of our partners. So thank all of them. And if you have an opportunity to do business with them, please support them with your business too. That's really what makes this work. So quick stats. We are just shy of 1,400 members, nonprofit members in TANGO. That represents about 160,000 people that work in the nonprofit sector. So this enables us to create scale that historically has not existed for the sector. We have 26 socially responsive partner groups that sit on our platform. We span 3 regions, albeit we have membership from, at last count, 28 different states. We have hubs, if you will, in Connecticut, Mass, and Rhode Island with very active chapters. We have a foundation, the TANGO Foundation, which provides scholarships. And if any of you have a rising star within your ranks, I encourage you to apply for our scholarships. Every year we give a couple of these to rising stars in the nonprofit sector to help them financially support them get better educated in leadership training and economics, things that will be impactful for them as they work in your organizations. This year we had 40 hosted events. Or last year, I should say, and going forward, we're at least on track to hit 50 to 60 hosted events. Every one of them is free for the nonprofit sector. Next slide, please. So our mission is really threefold. First, we provide education and training. That's a tenet of every one of our partners, and you're witnessing that today. So we as a partner group, our DNA is really on the business side, and we collectively get together to share our intellectual capital to help make nonprofits better. So there's this continuation of support and education throughout the year. We encourage you to tune in and join us whenever you can. All of our partners have also created a preferred offering for our membership. Things like price points, value add, negotiations with various vendors that are a significant discount. We in the insurance world have our own proprietary insurance programs that are offering tremendous savings for the sector. And then lastly, mission support is where we really try to roll up our sleeves and help the nonprofit sector through donations, through our foundation, which I mentioned, through volunteering. This is really part of our DNA and part of our culture to support the sector. Next slide, please. So member benefits, you'll see the range around our circle of our preferred services. They're all professional services. We turn down more firms than we accept to partner with us. They are vetted for their expertise and their commitment and sort of their philosophy in serving the sector. So whether it's HR compliance, accounting, legal, insurance, they have all been vetted for their expertise in working with the sector and all offer tremendous value. Next slide. So COVID-19 has changed the world as we know it. We're all living through that now. We, over the last month or two, have really been trying to develop some programs that help nonprofits address some of these issues. So I just want to take through a few resources that we have. One is the TANGO prescription discount card. There is no cost for you to access this card. We are happy to send the supply out to you and your employees, or you can download it off of our website, or you can even text one to yourself by dialing 21,000, write the word TANGO, and you'll have a card. This is good at over 65,000 pharmacies and provides discounts on medications of up to 75%. There's no cap on it. There's no cost on it. There's no sign up. There's no hidden agenda. We worked with a pharmacy benefit manager to help us support the nonprofit sector. We have seen so many organizations fiscally have to go to super high deductibles. We have a lot of people furloughed on COBRA or even who have lost their insurance. So this is something that if you'd like to channel this downstream to your employees, your friends of your organizations, we're happy to supply you with these cards. We found a great PPE aggregation ordering system through one of our friends, the Kennedy Center, a large nonprofit here in Connecticut. They've been a channel for ordering PPE for federal agencies and even the state of Connecticut. They are ordering massive volumes of masks and gowns. So I know the supply is starting to ease up a bit, but if you are struggling to find any of these and want a very, very attractive price point, I encourage you to go to the Kennedy Center website. The subsidiary that they've created for this is called Palm and Able. It's named after the founders of the Kennedy Center. And they're ordering 250,000 units at a pop. So the price point from what we have seen is very, very competitive. The Schuster Group ordered 3,000 masks last week and have donated them out to nonprofits. We've just placed an order for another supply of PPEs and plan to donate that out to our friends in the nonprofit sector as well. So if you have any need, if you're truly in need for some of this, I encourage you to contact us. We are happy to support the sector through donating PPEs. We have a resource website. I mean, you can't open your email today without being bombarded with COVA regs and all sorts of things. So we have spent quite a bit of time aggregating it into a simplistic kind of regulatory resource. It's both on the Schuster Group website as well as TANGO's website. And if you're looking for an up-to-date place to look at HR, legal, and regulatory issues, feel free to drop into our sites. We're also hosting weekly compliance webinars. Every Tuesday, there's a compliance with a legal bent. Every Wednesday, there's an HR webinar. They're done through our partner firm, NFP, and it's been very well attended, and we're getting great feedback on it. They've also added a Monday version addressing the issues of coming back to work. So look for our website, and you'll be able to log in and register for those webinars if you'd like. And then lastly, with budgets tightening as they are, we're having a great deal of traction on the employee benefit platform we've created. We have proprietary plans with Aetna, Connecticut, and Harvard Pilgrim, specifically for our nonprofit TANGO members. They're generating significant savings in the marketplace. So that is a significant line item for most nonprofits. And if you'd like to get another vantage point or leverage those cost structures, I encourage you to check that out.
Roland, one question. If you could just repeat how to get the prescription card.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Amber. So there's 3 ways to get it. Really, you can download 4 ways. You can download one simply on our website, and it's TANGO RX, I believe, right, Rob? TANGO Alliance RX or /RX, or you just go to our website and you'll see a header for it, and you can download one there. You can call us and or email us, and we can send a supply of hard copy ones that you can distribute out to anybody you want, quite frankly. Theoretically, they should be a friend of a nonprofit, but there's no limitations on who actually accesses these discounts. And then lastly, the easiest one that I have found is to simply text 21000 and write in the body of the text TANGO, and within a few seconds you'll have your pharmacy discount card. And you can use that right with any pharmacist in the network, and again, the 65,000 of them. You'll note on the screen here, you'll see the BIN number and PCN number. That's what the pharmacist needs to access those discounts. So we're getting quite a bit of good feedback on this. Especially for those folks that have high deductibles or are lacking insurance right now. Healthcare costs, in particular prescription costs, are significant. Next slide, please. So the TANGO Nonprofit Method is a book that my associate Jack has poured his heart and soul into, and many years of experience. It is a fantastic resource for anybody that is either new to the nonprofit sector or wants to learn more about it, really from a business governance fundamental approach. This is not getting into mission delivery, it's getting into running the business of a nonprofit, which is a very complex organization. We are doing teachings around this and consulting around this with Jack's lead, but it's available for sale on our website and I believe we're also on Amazon right now too. Yeah. I encourage you to take a look at it. It is a fantastic resource for boards.
Or something, and I don't know.
As well. So it's a great resource. If you're interested, please contact us. We'd be happy to link you to the place to purchase one. So that's what's going on with TANGO. We continue to push the envelope with innovation and trying to be responsive in these times. If you have ideas for us, we welcome your feedback. We get our best ideas from our membership, quite frankly. So if there are some pain points that you think TANGO might play a role in with the scale and size that we have, please let us know. We're happy to pursue those ideas. But today we're going to get into the conversation about surviving the nonprofit quarantine. So I'm going to turn it over to Jack. Jack, can you make some introductions formally to Amber and Ed and begin the discussion?
First of all, I really want to thank and welcome everyone who's listening in today or watching us today. We, as Roland said, we try to do different things at TANGO. And in a time where there's no shortage of information in your email about some of the technical things you need to know about dealing with the crisis, such as the way to get funding, we thought we would instead turn the matter around and open up to our members this forum in which they can pick my brain. I'm a lawyer. I practiced for 36 years before joining TANGO. Ed Spinella is the head of the nonprofit practice group at Murtha, Cullina. Ed, you can introduce yourself. And Amber is a dear friend who's got a long experience in the accounting profession. And you may want to say a word each about your firms if you'd like.
Sure. So, Murtha, Cullina, well, we have the privilege of working with various folks that are already on this call. So, thank you for the chance to work with you. We're a regional, I'd say, Boston, Connecticut, New York firm. And we have a standalone tax exempt practice group, which I chair. Jack left out that I had the privilege of working under him and learning from a true core of the nonprofit community. So about 95% of my practice consists of advising nonprofits of all different shapes and size. We also have a COVID-19 resources page on our website if you want to check that out. There may be a link in Tango to it. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to have this sort of no holds barred frank honest discussion with us. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
And I'm Amber Tucker. I'm with FML. I've been working with nonprofits for about 15 years in various ways on the financial aspect of it. Our firm is located in Glassbury, Connecticut, but we also have offices in New Haven, Stamford, and in Enfield. This topic that we're discussing today is been an important one for the past few years, but with the current pandemic that we're in, I think it's escalated the crisis to talk about it now. I wanted to let you know that there is a chat box available for you to add questions that we can talk about throughout this session. So please go ahead and chat. We have muted each of you, and because there are so many of you on the line, we're just going to ask that you stay muted, but to ask your question in the chat box. And also, now that we're speaking and not sharing a screen, if you haven't used a WebEx, in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you can click the active speaker box and it'll show who is speaking. I find that's the best way to watch this type of webinar.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you very much. Let me start with this. As I was preparing for this session, I did a lot of reading to see what's going on in various states, including Connecticut. And I tried to get my mind wrapped around the enormity of this situation, because it really is enormous. I'm an optimist by nature, but I will tell you, this is frightening. And I think that to deny the frightening aspects of what's going on is a bad thing to do, because I think you have to be really open-minded as you confront the many challenges that are coming your way and will continue to come your way even after the immediate quarantine is over. And in doing this preparation, in my mind, I kind of broke the questions up into three general types of categories. And we have some to present to you to get this started. First, there are what I'll call the microeconomic questions, and that is, what do you do if you're having trouble meeting payroll, or if you're behind in your rent or your mortgage, or any other similar type of problem is descended upon you unexpectedly? What do you do to keep the lights on? Secondly, from a macro point of view, the question is strategic, and that is, what does your future look like? Will you survive? Should you survive? Should you merge? All of these different things have to be on the agenda at your board meetings, and they have to be weighed quite seriously, I think. And the third related area that I'm interested in hearing from, especially if there's some funders in this our lineup today, is if you're a foundation and you're making grants into the nonprofit sector, what are your criteria going to be going forward? I mean, are you willing to provide liquidity for 3 or 4 months, with the hope that that will bring you to a point where stability is reached? Or are you, as funders, taking, the kind of attitude that a bank might towards when making a loan, taking a hard look at liquidity, looking at long-term prospects, and deciding whether or not to hang in there or not? So it's a whole wide variety of those three clusters of questions. Now, before I ask the first one to Ed and Amber, I want to just read to you a paragraph from an article that was on the publication Inside Charity, written by a woman named Kathleen Robinson. She's a friend of mine. She teaches at Clemson University. And she cites studies from 4 states: New Jersey, California, Texas, and Massachusetts. Right? And let me just read the stats from the Massachusetts, from the New Jersey situation. The study found that 78% of the nonprofits polled had already canceled programs or events. 17% suspended all operations temporarily. 25% laid off or cut current staff. Of the 207 that responded to the New Jersey survey, there was a total of $46 million in the form of a shortfall. Over 4,200 positions and 88 nonprofits were furloughed or laid off, even though 40% of the organizations were providing services deemed essential. So I don't know if there's numbers like that have been gathered for Connecticut or not. I don't know if TANGO has the resources to do that. But with that as a backdrop, let me ask the first question to Ed and Amber, and this is a specific one. I understand that the state of Connecticut, through DDS and DEMIS and others, has adopted the position that they can recoup, right, any of the benefits that the nonprofits have enjoyed through the PPP program, for example. Ed and Amber, you're on the front line these days. I'm not. Ed, you want to start and then put
Sure.
me with Amber and see how that's playing out, and we can discuss what might be able to be done about that.
So I appreciate the softball question there to start it off. So with all things CARES Act related, especially the PPP program, it's a moving target and things are so fluid. I've had some clients that have asked questions about the PPP, and literally overnight an FAQ gets released or a news article is released about the DOJ taking action, and the landscape shifts a little bit. What we have seen, and I think actually, some of us have been advising clients have been on the front lines, as well as they're speaking to their lobbyists, candidly, because I think it's a little bit of a legislative solution ultimately, is some of the state agencies, I think DDS in particular has gone on the record, have said to the extent that you are fortunate enough to receive funds towards payroll and rent and utilities, and they're forgiven, we're going to look at those forgiven funds as an opportunity when cost settlement comes around to basically recoup the cost, the earmarked funds that we gave you for those same expenses. In other words, it's sort of a double dipping argument. That has not gone over well. And I see some people are saying audio is going in and out. That's not good. Amber, how do you take it from there, and then I'll try to figure out what's going on with my audio. But go ahead.
Right. So the concept that's coming through is the state doesn't want to pay for expenses that are being covered by PPP funding. So essentially, if you've received PPP funding to help assist pay for things like your payroll, utilities, rent, those dollars cannot be put against your state contracts or potentially other funders such as foundations. So DDS and now DOJ has come out clearly saying that fact. Your next steps are going to be to check if the State Department or your foundation don't specify, your next step is going to be to go to the contract or the agreement themselves. And that if it's clearly stating that it'll only fund expenditures once, or if there's expenditures being funded elsewhere that can be applied to that grant, that's where this issue arises. The good news, I don't know if it's good news, right? So some state agencies allow settlement as a percentage now. So say you received 100,000 PPP dollars to cover payroll. That's 100,000 that you won't be using against your state contract, that maybe you'll only have to half cost settle. So you'll be able to keep half into your cash flow.
Why is the state taking this aggressive a position? I mean, I can understand some of the accounting shenanigans. Sorry, Amber, but they're going. But it seems to me that the purpose of these federal programs was to spread liquidity around so the economy wouldn't grind to a halt quickly. And in Connecticut, given the poor record of funding and treatment, Why this on top of everything else
Right.
that the nonprofits have had to bear?
Yeah, it is definitely unfortunate. I think it does match the CARES Act. I don't remember the question,
Yeah.
but one of the clarifications was if you have funding from something else, you may not qualify for the PPP funds, or you may have to give a portion of it back, or may not be forgiven. I think that's kind of the stance that they're also trying to follow. So, some state funders have given extra funding during this time, so they don't want organizations, including the nonprofits, to be double dipping, and that's kind of the stance they're taking.
Yeah. That just seems unfortunate to me, because from my perspective as a lawyer, the government had to do this stuff so quickly. They didn't have time to write a lot of detailed regulations and Q&As and things like that. But the spirit of all this, as I said, was to get liquidity out there. And when it comes to nonprofits, especially social service nonprofits, I would have hoped, that maybe as they go through and figure all this out, that they would cut an extra break for the nonprofits, let them keep in the office if they can, because God knows they need the money. They're performing essential services, and to even take some of it back seems to be a little bit of nickel and diming to me.
Sure.
I think that's unfortunate. But what about cash? Cash is king, right? Cash is always king. And when I was in practice, I represented some insolvent and technically bankrupt nonprofits. And when cash gets short, people can start to get desperate. I've seen people do terrible things like not pay their withholding, 941, their withholding tax, and then owe the IRS money. But what about like those with endowments, even if it's a smaller endowment? I remember getting a lot of questions from people saying, "Well, can we tap into our endowment to cover this shortfall for a few years? And if we can't, what are the reasons why we can't? And should we tap into our endowment to cover the immediate cash flow problems we're having?" Ed, anything on that, or?
I'll try to. Can you hear me better now? Does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and actually, John Griswold raised the question earlier, and it's a big one. And I used to frame it this way: is your endowment a lifeline, or is it forbidden fruit? And I think it cuts to a really basic issue, which is your mission can outlast your legal entity, the structure that holds your mission. And when you're talking about a true endowment, something that what the donor said, I want you to preserve the principle in perpetuity, that's a hard place to be in, because you have to look at that and say, the donor wanted this gift to survive this particular legal entity. It wanted it to perpetuate and continue to benefit the mission. What does that mean? It might mean that you need to close your doors. It might mean you need to find another organization that can carry on your mission and continue to use the income generated by your endowment. I can tell you in Connecticut, the Attorney General has not generally been receptive to requests to access an endowment.
I'm saying, Ed, what was that? Could you repeat that again? It didn't come through.
The Attorney General in the state of Connecticut has
Yeah.
not been receptive to attempts to access the endowment, to basically for liquidity or to loan against it or things like that.
Is that a formal position, or is that something that just informally that you're hearing from your people over there?
It's anecdotal. It comes from dealing with those people over and over and over again, and it's been a pretty uniform and consistent stance. Now, what would have changed due to these circumstances? Possibly, but historically, that's been their position, consistent with their statutory standing to represent the public's position or interest in those charitable donated funds.
Yeah. What about from an accounting standpoint, Amber? I mean, I know there are all these, the new accounting protocols about how endowments reflected on a balance sheet. And I want to come back to Ed's comment a minute ago about the longevity of a perpetual endowment. But before doing that, I understand that the Financial Accounting Standards Board has modified the reporting requirements under generally accepted accounting principles to include liquidity tests. Could you tell me when is that effective and what that means and how it might affect nonprofits as they start to go through the next audit cycle?
Sure. So there are liquidity financial disclosures now. which everyone should be familiar with at this point if you've gone through an audit. But essentially, in your disclosures, you're required to demonstrate what your current available assets are, right? So that would be your cash, your receivable,
Yep.
and then deduct from that any of your restricted funds. So anything, using an old terminology, temporarily restricted or permanently restricted, and as well as board designated. Those funds get deducted from your current assets that are liquid to come up with assets that are available for 1 year. So that is clearly now disclosed within your financial statements. But on top of that, within the accounting pronouncements, we are required to disclose any underwater funding. So if you have an endowment that you have borrowed from, right? So if you have your corpus, right? So your
Yep.
restricted piece, if you've borrowed from that, we are required to disclose within the financial statements the portion that is reduced by. So not a great idea to have to borrow from that endowment.
Yeah, and I suppose the stock, what's happened in the stock market puts that issue
It's not
right
helping.
at the top. If there's been a
Right.
recent gift, if you got a gift and it was worth $1 million and now it's worth 600,000, you got a different issue. Look, I mean, the takeaway that I would offer to people listening in, if they're caught between the rock and the hard place of cash flow problems and an endowment that they control, is be very wary about tipping into the endowment. I mean, it's easy. More often, the hard answer that I've given to many people in this situation is, you know what? If you're in the position where you got to tap into your endowment, right? The first thing you got to tell me is whether or not you got a plan to repay what you take out. I mean, that's would seem as a fiduciary matter fundamentally. We're going to dip into our endowment. Part of the board resolutions that approve that process should be able to present a realistic plan to repay it. In other words, not just pie in the sky, we hope things will get better and we're going to repay it. We're going to be able to restore that by having fundraisers, or we have a donor, so on and so forth. And if not, I have always argued that the best decision for a board to make in that situation is to dissolve the organization or to merge it. Because the entity itself is not what's perpetual, it's the mission. I mean, entities come and go. Entities are staff, they're buildings and stuff. But the endowment won't just go away if the entity does. It will be moved over to another nonprofit that does a similar type of mission. And when it's moved, it will be a move that's approved and scrutinized by the courts and the Attorney General's office. So there is in the law a procedure whereby you can't do that. And it's a tough decision for boards to make, but boards need to be able to make the tough decisions in a time like this, and whether the board is strong enough to make that case to staff members who may lose their jobs because of that, doesn't take away from the fact that you shouldn't be borrowing from your permanent assets. You're robbing from the future generations of people who are going to be served by the mission when you do that. And the best decision is to shut the door.
Right.
It's honorable. It's moral. There's legal processes that make sure things get done properly. But the temptation of dipping into cash endowment is hard to avoid, but you really have to.
And there are ways, Jack, just to piggyback on that, there are other ways to perpetuate the legacy of your organization. We've had opportunities, if we can get ahead of it, to structure deals with the quote-unquote successor entity, whereby directors of the dissolving entity continue to serve on the board of the surviving.
And that really segues into a merger, right? So that's really different than a dissolution. I mean, if you're really up against it, I mean, there are things you can do. You can merge or you can dissolve, and there are differences between the two.
Right.
But in the case of a simple dissolution, the successor may not be for you to choose. The courts may do that. But let me ask about on the themes of liquidity, Amber. I mean, I remember like when I was in practice and people were running short on cash, I'd say, well, have you ever thought about borrowing from your vendors? By reaching terms to go from 30 days to 90 days without interest, or from 30 days to 120 days without interest from people you owe money to. And business world, that's an easy sell because business people kind of get it, you know. But in the nonprofit world, sometimes people don't realize that that's a technique that's available to you. I mean,
Absolutely.
I even did it a couple of times where with nonprofits where we would go out, we'd get a list of the vendors and we'd rank them, you know, 90 by age, we'd age the payables by size and so, and then we would have a chief officer contact each of these vendors and say, hey, look, I need time. I need
Yep.
time. And so you can operate on that float for a while.
Absolutely. Especially in a time like this with the pandemic, all the businesses are standing, and the businesses that you're asking for the extension,
Yeah.
they're probably asking for extensions from their vendors as well. It's a circle.
Exactly.
So it's definitely out there. And one thing I do want to just mention briefly too, if you're not taking advantage of it, there is payroll tax deferral available right now as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't realize
Yes.
that. Wow.
Yes. So you can be deferring your payroll taxes. 50% will be due December 2021, and the other 50% December 2022. The only caveat is if you did receive PPP funding, that 8-week period or whatever period you're using to pay for payroll, that cannot be deferred.
That's huge. That's huge, Amber.
Yes.
I mean, what are the conditions on it? What if you can't repay it? Like one of the big bugaboos about withholding taxes is there's personal liability for the responsible officer at the organization that doesn't file a quarterly returns with the money in it, right?
Mhm.
So what we're saying is the IRS is saying it will allow you to defer it to that point in time. But are there conditions on that? Are there increases in liability, or is it just we're giving you this time to hopefully get your act together? Because the money you're withholding is the government's money. You know,
Right.
it's called a trust fund tax, you know. So it's the government's money, so it's always wanting to collect it. So it's interesting that it's going to give you time to defer the payment.
Yeah, I'm sure there are conditions. I don't know, Ed, if you can speak more to those conditions or not. I can get the answer.
No,
I happen to know that one.
want that to the PPP experts that are back doing their webinar tomorrow, actually. But I know that's one thing we've keyed in on, as well as unemployment compensation reimbursement, direct
Mhm.
participant. There's some relief there as well, although there's been some controversy there, as we know.
Right.
So yeah, everyone's keyed in on the PPP, but there are other aspects to the CARES Act that can benefit a nonprofit. But to bring it back to the 30,000 foot level, I see that all as short-term relief. It's not going to address, in my humble opinion, and now I'll show my colors a little bit, it's not going to address the long-term strategic needs. And there's been some success stories already. One thing that we discussed prior to this was it's so important for nonprofits. You don't have owners, but you have stakeholders. How do you stay connected to them? You know, the old ways of having galas and golf tournaments, that's on pause. So it's forced nonprofits to think like entrepreneurs and to think about what are the ways we can continue to connect, not just to ask for money, but keep our people connected to us. And I think that's a great example of ways that you need to start thinking strategically now. You need to lean on your directors now to help you. Those are your resources. That's your human capital. You're seeing some success stories, but I think this is when it's time to roll up your sleeves and demand more from your directors, and hopefully you have the directors.
That's something I also want to touch upon. And for all of those who are listening in, I mean, you know, the style of this fireside chat is we're just kind of talking openly. You know, we're not. We're trying to, because if we talk openly about do's and don'ts and bad things, the things we disagree with, you'll learn more, even if you disagree with us. And if you disagree, just send me an email or whatever. But I want to talk about the merger thing. All right. I mean, back when I was in practice in 2007, I remember writing a newsletter about mergers. You know, when are they going to come? You know, because you could even see back then how they made sense. And in the for-profit world, mergers are really driven by numbers. I mean, I did a lot of for-profit work. You know, if a merger makes sense, it's going to enhance your profit and loss statement. It's going to increase your market. You do it, and it's about money. In the nonprofit sector, which I got into later in my career, I was surprised by I guess I was surprised, but I was naive by the fact that when it comes to a mission-driven organization, man, oh man, the obstacles to merging, even when it makes financial sense, or can be large, and for the most part, I think unwarranted, candidly, but over the years, I saw it happen repeatedly. A merger that made sense wouldn't happen because one of the CEOs didn't want to retire yet, and the boards were reluctant to say, "All right, one of you is going to go, and we'll give you a severance package, but we're going to do the deal because it makes sense." It seems to me now I hear people making inquiries about merger as if it's something you can do by flipping a switch. Not realizing that depending on the size of the organizations, a merger is a complicated transaction. It's going to take a lot of time to look at because the legal and accounting and regulatory pitfalls are huge. It may be too late. I mean, it may be too late for some that if they're just starting out now thinking they're going to do this in 60 or 30 days. Plus, it seems to me that the uncertainty of what's going on would be a real business impediment to a merger. I mean, if I was on a board, I'd be saying, my God, this isn't 6 months ago. I got to now be looking at the merger partner. Like, how strong are they? Where's their funding going to come from? And if we're merging two very weak organizations, what are we doing? We're not doing anything good, I don't know. Are you, Eddie and Amber, are you seeing discussions like this amongst the nonprofit boards you're working with?
Yes, I think that there's always an ongoing discussion about mergers. And I agree with you. If you haven't already thought about the deal points and the parameters of the merger that might make sense for your organization, it's going to be hard just to flip a switch now and jump all in. It's just going to be difficult. But I think for certain organizations, given where they are in this issue, it could be part of the discussion, whether it's about survival or potentially coming out the other side of this thing strategically ready to, for lack of a better word, kick some butt and emerge in a stronger position. Because there is another side to this, and I think some organizations are going to think
And you're
entrepreneurial.
breaking up again, Ed. It's
Go ahead, Amber.
you got to get a microphone. Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Some of my clients are and boards that I'm working with are talking about this. Sadly, I think that you hit the nail on the head, Jack. It's more talking about how do we not fail instead of how do we carry on our mission. If our mission means carrying it on with a different organization name, I think we need to take the word failure off the table, and that if you need to carry your mission under a different organization name, there's nothing wrong with that. The difference is that the mission is still occurring.
Yes.
I think that's a big part of it. And if you're talking about how do I get cash flow because of this pandemic, and you're extending out your vendors to get you through this, I think that's one thing. But if you're struggling before this, then the pandemic has made it that much worse. I think it's really it's time to have those tough conversations of where do we put who else can help us carry on this mission?
Yeah. I mean, it's an important question. I mean, if for those of you who are listening and who get our monthly newsletter, the Tango Trends newsletter, one just went out earlier today. And if you look at it, there's an article I wrote, and there's a video there of an interview I did with a fellow named Louis Fawcett, who's with the National Association of Nonprofit Organizations and Executives in South Carolina. He's primarily a fundraiser, but he in the video, which is on the web, you'll see it's 15 minutes where you're talking. He kind of makes the point that as far as he's concerned, a lot of nonprofits were weak beforehand. And they're not gonna come out the other end, and that's okay, candidly. It's not the end of the world if the activities and functions of the ones that fail are in fact picked up by others that are in a better position to do it. But it is a gut-wrenching time, and it involves a lot of employees and staff and people you like. And you don't want to see it in, but that I don't want to sound like the grim reaper here, but those kind of things have to be on the table. It's you got to have your eyes wide open as you do this. Another point that I want to get at is boards of directors, and CEOs, are they strong enough to get through this? I mean, again, we talk candidly. I mean, I've seen organizations with really strong boards and really strong CEOs that have the acumen and the experience to avoid panic and to move ahead and to say, we can get through this, and in 12 months or 18 months, we'll be fine. Hold on. And I believe them. But on the other hand, I don't know if that's a universal. I don't know if there's enough strength and to take the bull by the horns in a case where all heck can be breaking loose. Again, I'm not on the ground as much, but it's a legitimate concern. And if you're a CEO and you're listening in, it's a fair question to ask. How good is my board? What can the board do for me in this situation? And I don't just mean write checks, but will they come to extra meetings? Will they roll up their sleeves? Are they a motivated group of individuals that's going to do that or not? Because if not, the CEO is left in a very difficult position. And the reverse can be true. I mean, I have seen cases where you've got a really pretty crackerjack board, but a weaker management team. And in the presentation I did with Lewis, if you listen to it, he said in a situation like that, one or two things should happen. The board should fire the CEO and replace them, or the CEO should fire the board and replace the board. I mean, half tongue in cheek, but those types of issues are important. For people to deal with. I don't mean to give a speech on this, but I think I want the message to be rigorous, and I want these things to be on the table because they really need to be.
Yes, I agree, and I often see the same scenario where you have a strong board and a weaker management, or a strong management and a weaker board. Because those that have strong of both, they're probably they're in an okay situation because they have that strategic plan in place already.
Right.
So it's you probably have a stronger board than you think. You just need to push
Right.
hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And I know that
Right.
he's working on calling in. He's going to try to.
Yeah, I'm on it. I'm on
great.
it. Can you hear me?
Did you hear that question? Because I would
Oh,
would
yeah.
love to hear your response to that, because you're talking to nonprofits and their boards and their management teams all the time. And so, I mean, without mentioning client names or anything, what are you seeing in that dynamic? I mean, are people stepping up?
Well,
Are people getting angry at each other under the pressure?
so listen, it's the whole spectrum. I think I've had a couple of clients that after a month of sort of just being polite, had some very frank discussions that were part of attorney-client privilege discussions, saying, "What are we doing? We can't do business as usual." And the CEO is basically saying to the board, "I need you guys to step up, otherwise you're out."
Right.
And it was that frank, and some people stepped up, some people resigned. And they brought in a couple new directors to help out, to really step up to the plate, that were fans of the organization, but were not fiduciaries. Another client on the complete opposite spectrum, the management really wasn't being responsive, was sort of getting into like a bunker mentality. And the board started sending emails, CCing me, saying, "What about this emergency powers provision in the Non-Stock Corporation Act?" And I said, "What is that? I know it exists, but I've never actually had to work with it." And they were at the point of saying, "We're going to invoke this emergency powers provision in order to save this organization because we can't get clear answers from management." Thankfully, most clients are somewhere in between. And as Amber said, I don't think all is lost. If you're having issues, if you feel like you're not getting support from your board, if you feel like you're not getting answers from your management, now's the time to roll up your sleeves, to be very honest and frank and say, "Hey, we're in this together, and we're either in it or we're not in it." That's where I'm coming from right now, as far as what I'm seeing. So
Yeah,
it's difficult.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Jack, it's difficult because this is a unique time. and usually we're not in the normal ordinary course of things. Usually the board, does need to give management some space. But right now, I think that this is a good time to have more ordinary, ongoing discussions with the board. Not for them to micromanage management, but for them to get involved and to help, to be a resource.
Yeah, I mean, like call a special meeting, right? Call an emergency special meeting of the board, and work together to do the following. And this is what I think the most important advice I can offer to anyone on the line. If you're in the middle of chaos, right, it's very aggravating and scary, right? And the goal is to get out of the chaos and to get to serenity again at some point in the future. And I will tell you what management needs to do, and the board needs to do it with it, is to develop a written plan. And I'm deadly serious when I say this. The mere fact that you're going to sit down with a blank piece of paper, or if you don't use paper anymore, a computer screen, and you take the time and you draw Venn diagrams if you have to, and you say, all right, here's our cash flow. This is our burn rate. We've got cash to get us through 90 more days. Here's our banking relationship. The bank officer doesn't like us anyway. What are we going to do about that? These are our principal donors. Right? And we think that they will fund us. They'll give us what's called bridge funding, or a bridge us, right? But the donors in that case may want a specific plan so they can see that they're not just throwing money down a rat hole, because you've got a written plan to show them how you're going to get out of this. And the intellectual exercise of doing that analysis and writing it down will force you to think these things through clearly. So my advice to a client, again, the situation is a variable, but sit down and do a long-term, short-term plan to map out the strategy for 6 months, 9 months, whatever, and then see how close you can adhere to the plan, and use the plan as a basis for getting the support you need from your vendors, right? We talked about going to vendors to catch a break. If you say, dear Mr. Vendor, here's our plan. Will you help us out? And if they see a plan, they're probably going to say, all right, these guys are thinking hard. I'm going to give them a break. You could do the same thing with the bank if you need forbearance, if you're out of covenant on a bank loan, with your donors, with everyone else. But with the mere fact of doing that intellectual exercise is worth the money and worth the time. But to do it, you have your lawyer come in, you have your accountant come in, you bring these people in and out of the room to help develop the plan. But you do it, and you do it quickly, and you do it well. Cindy Howard sent in a question. Did you get that one, Amber? She sent in something.
Yes. So can you advise on the message we include in our thank you letters for an event that's canceled just before COVID restrictions? For an example, the letter reads, for purposes of your 2020 income tax filing, X dollars or X company hereby acknowledges your kind gift of $1,000, of which X dollar is tax deductible for charitable contribution. The question is, if the donor didn't receive a benefit because the event didn't occur, do you need to take that deduction out? I would say if the event didn't occur and your donor is kind enough to continue to give you that donation, they can deduct the full amount.
I would agree.
Yeah, correct. It's a different situation.
And I would add into that it's another opportunity to communicate them, thank them, and say, and we're going to stay in contact with you. A couple of clients have already instituted, what are they called? Virtual campaigns where they basically don't just ask for money, but they tell stakeholders, here's what we're up to, as a way to keep people connected. So that's a golden opportunity to continue to push on that relationship, let them know you're still there and you're going to be there. Because I think that's what's difficult. I think of so many clients that I look forward to their annual events every year and seeing them, shaking hands, having a good time. I don't know what's going to happen long term, but for now, better to do something that continues to let people know you're there and tries to connect with them. There's been some success stories.
Right.
Jack was kind enough to pass along some really upbeat, optimistic stories from the Hartford Business Journal. Some people are hitting home runs already, and it's going to be the ones that attack it now, refine it, perfect it, they're gonna be the ones who tap into it the best, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, Roland and I were talking about this. I'm aware of two organizations. I won't mention their names, not that there's any secret here, downstate, that I gather had a virtual gala last weekend or very recently, and the results were amazing. Like $500,000 was raised in one virtual gala, and I got to tell you something. I remember being on boards when we were doing galas and silent auctions and everything else. I used to say, if you added up all the volunteer hours that it took to do this event, and you pegged each of them at $15 an hour, and you used that as a delta to measure against your gross, you would find that it took a lot of money to make the money at the gala or at the auction. And I'll tell you, if donors are receptive to doing it virtually, I mean, I got to think that the overhead cost that go along with raising the money in a virtual gala will be substantially less. I mean, there's no food, there's no beverage. I mean, it's an easier drop to the bottom line. And as I'm learning to use Zoom and all this great new technology, I'm thinking to myself, I would go to a virtual gala, and I don't have to put on a tux, and I'll just send them a check or my credit cards, because what I really want is not so much the evening of entertainment, although it's fun. What I really want to do is have the organization get the cash that it needs to continue its mission.
Okay. We are about an hour in, Jack, so I just want to remind the participants, as well, if they have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat.
Yeah, we just got one from our farm I saw come through. You got that one?
Olive Farm is hosting a in Plaid Home Edition farm-to-table fair that you can pick up and take home, and a cow chip raffle. Virtual watch cows. Well, that's fun.
Cow chips, that's a different one.
Cow
I see
chips.
Erica
There you
laughing
go.
there. Yeah. You're selling cow chips out there in Bloomfield, Erica? How much are they?
A plus for entrepreneurialism. I mean, we've been.
Yes.
I know the term gets thrown around a lot. People say, "Oh, we're a social enterprise." Here's your chance to really show it. Think like a business. Think like an entrepreneur. Don't be afraid to throw ideas out there. Look to your board. I could think of one organization I'm actually on the board of. They launched a really successful, what I'll call a social enterprise.
Yep.
And without it, they didn't miss a beat. They've said, okay, we had a storefront, it can't be open. Here's how we're gonna continue to sell these products virtually, and they didn't miss a beat. So I mean, this is your opportunity, to think outside the box.
Yeah, and you need, the creativity and leadership around those things. One
Right.
general point I'd like to make, unless there's another question that comes in, is I sometimes speak critically of the nonprofit sector or boards or whatever, but I do that out of really love and affection for the sector. And the message I try to give to people is that, the nonprofit sector, such as we know it in this country, is a unique evolutionary phenomenon of our history. It evolved in England, the United States. It's a wonderful, wonderful system that they don't have in China or Russia or other countries. And it works by having people, private citizens on boards who are donors, create organizations that fulfill a public purpose. But the public purpose is fulfilled by the private people who give the money, who run the organization. In other countries, government doesn't. And perseverance in the face of this is a word that I like to use. People survive bad stuff and come out the other end. This is one of those events. It's a bad thing. It's going to ripple through the sector for a while. I think there's going to be some permanent rethinking of models and other things. And I think the sector's overdue for that. But I want the sector to get better than it is, because I want it to be strong enough not only to survive what's going on now, but to survive the next one when it comes. And I think that when I did this interview with Louis Fawcett, and again I urge you to watch it, he made the point that, nonprofits too often live by paying yesterday's bills today, and they really need to have strategic plans that include things like 6 months of working capital reserves, so much in the bank. I mean, things to keep them financially strong so they can weather the storm. Now, that's easier said than done, to be sure. But that segues back to the point I was making earlier about I wonder what funders are thinking. Like, what do all the grant-making foundations in Connecticut do in this crisis? Are they going to just provide liquidity in the short term? I guess that's okay. But I would urge them to say, wait a minute, now's the time for the big pause. Let's take a hard look at how we got here and how we're going to get out of it. And hopefully they would be willing to fund. I'm not even sure what they're going to fund yet, but fund efforts to do a really deep analytical dive on some of these issues, both from a policy perspective, legal accounting and whatnot, to just strengthen the sector, make it strong, make the organizations that come out of this really strong, really able to succeed, and not have to always looking over their back for where the next dollar is going to come in, because the work is so vitally important. I mean, who's kidding who? Whether if you're serving someone with a disability or someone with addiction or a family in crisis, man, these are absolutely necessary functions for society to work. And I believe wholeheartedly that the best sector to do it is the nonprofit sector, because it's really a special thing. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean you can't criticize the nonprofit sector or say, look, there are things you could be doing better, because it's a serious sector. People's lives rise or go up or down based upon the things that we do for them. And I don't want to see the sector weaken permanently because of this. And I fear for that. I really do. I fear for that. Look, we're getting near the end here. Let me just, no other questions. Let me just, again, thank all of you for listening. Okay. If you think this was worthwhile, let us know. We'll do it again. Okay. Just send an email to us, if you have an idea for more specific topics you'd like discussed, let us know about that too. I mean, TANGO is a wonderful organization, and Rollins Schuster, to his credit, has made it happen. He brings new perspectives, new things, and we can do this quite easily. Candidly, we could do it weekly or every 2 weeks. We could have an open session like this. People can send in questions in advance. They can, and we'll just talk it through. And hopefully people will learn something from what it is we have to say, and we'll go back and incorporate what they learn in their own organizations.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much for
any closing comments here. Or?
Yes. Thank you, TANGO, for hosting this session. As I said in my opening remarks, I think this was an issue before this pandemic, and it's just unfortunately gotten worse. But if there are further questions that you come to your mind after the fact, please feel free to reach out to us. Available to answer any of your questions.
Yeah, because this is what I think we'd like this to be. We'd like this to be like maybe we'll turn this into a TANGO discussion forum. Where every 2 weeks we do this, and people can just feel free to just come at us with what's on their mind, and we'll do our best to give them to provide some value to our TANGO nonprofit members.
Right.
For free. The partners make this possible. Thank them for it, and we can go about and making things better for all of you. But thank you again. Really mean it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks to everyone in TANGO for putting it together. And we're all part of the same team here. We're in it with you, and we want to be here to have these frank discussions. So thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you all again. Have a good day. It's beautiful outside, and stay safe, everyone. Roland, I see you there. Thank you so much for making all this possible.
Nice job, guys. Nice job. Thank you very much. And everyone stay healthy, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Roland. Take care, everyone.